Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. I'm speaking with Darren Mattox, descendant of the Mattox family. Welcome.
Thank you.
When did your family come to Kenosha?
My family came to Kenosha 1947, shortly after World War II. Jimmy and Johnny Grimes followed their father to Kenosha. They came from Georgia. They were from a small town in Georgia called Elberton, Georgia, which is in the northeast corner of Georgia, right along the South Carolina border. And they migrated from there to Atlanta. Elberton was a very small town, about 6,500 people population-wise. They migrated to Atlanta with their mother, Losie Grimes, and their father, affectionately known as Tin High. And they grew up in Atlanta. They went to schools in Atlanta, attended Atlanta schools. They attended Ebenezer Baptist Church, which was a church that was pastored by Martin Luther King Jr.'s father. So they were baptized by Daddy King at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. Upon graduating from high school, I understand they were enrolled at the prestigious Morehouse College down in Atlanta. But unfortunately, World War II broke out and Johnny was drafted. Jimmy was not drafted, but Jimmy went down with Johnny and told the draft board that Johnny would not go unless Jimmy could go as well. So they both end up entering the U.S. Army, and they were stationed over in Africa. They saw action in Italy and several other places and were awarded combat stars for their action or for their service there. I believe Johnny was a truck driver, a medic truck driver, driving supplies back and forth, and Jimmy was a medic as well.
Okay, when did they actually come to Kenosha then?
So they actually came to Kenosha in 1947. Their father was already here. Johnny drove his father back from Atlanta to Kenosha and ended up liking it so much he stayed. He got a job here working shortly thereafter at Nash Motors. They were an automobile maker, and they had just recently started hiring blacks. It was a good paying job, and shortly thereafter, Johnny sent for his brother Jimmy. They were both running a tavern in Atlanta at that time, but the money at Nash Motors was so good that he sent for his brother Jimmy, and Jimmy joined him.
And when did your grandfather come?
My grandfather came shortly thereafter, either the end of 47 or early 48. And all three of them worked at American Motors. I understand Jimmy started in the foundry. At that time, those were the only jobs that blacks could attain, which was the lowest of the totem pole. Foundry work was very dirty work. It was very hot. I understand Jimmy didn't like it very much. I believe my grandfather started in the foundry as well, but he was able to move his way up to final repair. Johnny became a mechanic at the Rambler division and ended up becoming a certified mechanic. Jimmy left the foundry after 2 years. He left Nash Motors after 2 years and worked at JCPenney. And as I said before, Johnny, affectionately known as Rocky, worked at the Rambler division as a mechanic.
And how long did he work there?
He worked there for about, I want to say 15 years. 15 years would be 1962. That's when they went into business for themselves. the TikTok Tavern on 2717 60th Street. It's affectionately called the Twins TikTok. And from 1962 to roughly around 1995, they owned that tavern, in addition to another tavern called Rocky's, which was in the Lincoln neighborhood area.
And how long did your grandfather work at Nash Motors?
My grandfather worked at Nash Motors from 48 to 78, 30 years. He retired after 30 years.
Okay. And when the Twins opened up the TikTok Club, that was their business? That's what they did?
Yes, that was their business. As I aforementioned, that's what they did in Atlanta. They owned their own tavern in Atlanta called the Poinciana Club before they relocated to Kenosha. My grandfather, which I didn't state his name is actor Cordero Mattox Sr. He worked in the WPA program and moved around to different cities doing jobs for the federal government. He started in Knoxville, Tennessee, moved to New Jersey, and when Johnny and Jimmy called him, he was in Chicago working on the WPA program.
And what did your grandfather do after he retired?
After he retired, he and his brothers went into business for themselves in a snow removal and lawn service. His youngest brother and two of his other brothers followed him to Kenosha. My great uncle Raymond Mattox, my great uncle Tate Mattox, and my great uncle Marcus Mattox. They followed my grandfather and the twins to Kenosha. They all worked at Nash Motors, which later became American Motors around about 1954.
How did they find Kenosha when they first came?
Kenosha, compared to the South, the Jim Crow South, was very welcoming. They didn't find any of the discriminatory practices that they found down south, as far as you have to use separate restrooms, you had to drink from separate drinking fountains. The schools in Kenosha were integrated at the time. I know Jimmy and Rocky both said that they loved or enjoyed their time here in Kenosha. My grandfather was the same for the most part.
And when they came, were they renting? Did they buy a house? How did they, where did they
I would
live?
say, that time we're talking about shortly after World War II, blacks were considered second-class citizens, and Kenosha was no different from any other city in the United States at that time, that there were discriminatory practices as far as being able to attain affordable housing, whether you were trying to rent or whether you were trying to purchase your own home. I know many blacks who worked, blacks, Hispanics, and others that worked at American Motors, I'm talking about minorities, had to find housing outside of Kenosha, whether it was Racine or Milwaukee or down south in Zion and Waukegan. So it was hard to procure affordable housing in Kenosha. However, Nash Motors, American Motors, did provide housing for their employees at the Bonnie Haim housing project, which was directly kitty corner from the main plant on 52nd Street and 30th Avenue. And I know several of my great uncles lived there, Uncle Raymond, Uncle Tate, Uncle Marcus. My grandfather was able to find affordable housing or purchase his own home in the Lincoln neighborhood area. So we're talking about the American Brass neighborhood. So we're talking
And what
14th
time?
Avenue.
What time was that?
This was shortly after he got here, 48, 49.
Okay.
So he lived in a home there on 15th Avenue in the Lincoln neighborhood for about 10 years. And then when he tried to move west to the outskirts of the cities, what would probably consider the suburbs at the time, he could not procure or obtain a loan from Kenosha banks in order to finance, to build his own home. He had to actually go to Milwaukee to a black bank in order to get a loan to finance, to build his own home.
To build his own home?
Yes.
Okay. And what did that lead to? I mean, he persisted. This obviously wasn't something that happened right away when he learned about this, and he continued to fight for getting a loan.
Yeah, he was persistent. As I said, he did not stop after he was denied loans here in Kenosha. He went to bank in Milwaukee to secure the loan to build his home. He found a contractor, a white contractor that was willing to build the home here in Kenosha. Unfortunately, after the home was built, that contractor was blackballed or blacklisted. He could not build another home in Kenosha after he built a home for my grandfather, a black man, in the Forest Park neighborhood. I know when my grandfather first moved in after their home was built that he always carried a shotgun over his bed, in case any incidents occurred. Fortunately, there were no incidents that occurred.
Okay. Did he go to the city for any help or any reason? Did the city do anything when they learned that you couldn't get a loan as a black man?
Well, when the story spread through the black community and the Kenosha community, and around that time, we're talking about the height of the civil rights era, we're talking about the late 50s, early 60s, blacks in Kenosha organized. So what I mean by organized, they started their own local branch of the NAACP. They started their own local branch of the Corps, and they were able to sit down and talk with city leaders. I'm talking about the mayor at the time, which was Eugene Hammond, and share with the city administration the problems and issues they were having, trying to find affordable housing, living here or residing here in Kenosha. And as a result of that, because I understand the Bonnie Haim projects, which the federal government put here around 1940, around World War II area, by this time, 1960s, the projects were in bad condition. So they were trying to help relocate those families to homes that they could afford or move into themselves. So Eugene Hammond, the mayor at the time, and city administrators helped. I believe American Motors bought the Bonnie Haim projects, and the year that they bought it, they said that they would close it down 4 years after. So they gave people 4 years to relocate and find affordable housing. Behind what happened to my grandfather, I understand that people were able to move out of the Lincoln neighborhood area, which was considered a black enclave or a ghetto, and they were able to move to the north side of Kenosha, over in the Wilson Heights school, or the Wilson School neighborhood area. So we're talking about 45th Street to Washington Road, 28th Avenue to 39th Avenue. And so many people were able to find homes in that area, including my family. My uncle Raymond was able to purchase a home on 31st Avenue. My grandfather's nephew, Bill Mattox, who also worked at American Motors, he was actually a foreman there. He was able to purchase a home on 31st Avenue. But just like with many other American families, when family moved to Kenosha, they often stayed with family members and until they were able to find their own homes or own places to live. And so my grandfather, being one of the first to move to Kenosha, he often let people reside with him until they were able to move into their own homes. His youngest brother, Marcus Hayes Mattox, stayed with him for a while, him and his family. And then when my grandfather was able to move to the Forest Park neighborhood area, he rented his home to his youngest brother. His youngest brother lived downstairs with his family, his wife and 3 sons, and my father lived above him in that same house. And so when Bill Mattox, my grandfather's nephew, moved to Kenosha, he as well stayed with my grandfather over in the home on 6515 49th Avenue until he was able to purchase his own home.
Okay, and as a result of these conversations with the city, loans started to become available and churches were able to be built at that time then?
Yes, so out of something bad, I always tend to find, or I hope to find, a silver lining, or something good comes out of something bad. So based on what had happened to my grandfather, he being turned down for loans from Kenosha banks, it helped other people who came behind him able to secure loans from Kenosha banks. It helped the black community in Kenosha. There were 2 church congregations that were able to break ground and build their own edifices. Second Baptist Church was able to do so in 1964, and Coleman Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church was able to do so in 1968. And so my grandfather was fighting to build his own home around 1959-60.
Okay, and did the Grimes twins have any impact on the development of the churches and the black community growing at that time?
Yes, Jimmy and Rocky were very instrumental. They both owned their own homes as well, and also owned other business ventures other than the taverns. They opened their own filling station and car wash shortly after they opened a tavern in 1962. Unfortunately, that didn't last. I think they owned it for maybe 2 or 3 years. My father, who followed his father from Georgia, Elberton, Georgia, to Kenosha, worked at that filling station for a time. So this was around 1962. And so even with that failed venture, the 2 taverns were successful. Rocky's Lounge over in the Lincoln neighborhood area, and the Twins TikTok Club on 60th Street. They were able to help give the churches seed money, Jimmy and Rocky, because they were one of very few black business owners in the city. There was another black tavern before the TikTok Club, or the Twins TikTok Club, which is called the Viaduct Club. So that was black owned, but other than that, there was not too many other black businesses in Kenosha at that time, or black professionals. There weren't black teachers, there were not any black doctors, any black dentists. There were not many professional black people in Kenosha at the time. So what really helped blacks in Kenosha, because there wasn't a big number or a huge number of blacks in Kenosha at the time in 1960, there might have been 1,500 total, was that they found solidarity and unity. So working at the American Motors, they joined labor unions, UAW Local 72. Again, they started their own local branch of the NAACP. My grandfather and his brothers started their own fraternal order of the Masons. So it was the Scottish Rite, ancient accepted Scottish Rite Masons fraternal order that they started. So they found solidarity and unity, a band of brothers. So my grandfather, his 3 brothers, and the 2 twins were all in the Masonic fraternity together.
Can you tell me anything else about the twins?
Pretty much that's it. They made a promise to their mother. I know that they would always dress alike, and so they kept that promise to her even after her death. So their spouses would have to lay out their clothes for them and call each other on the phone to find out what they were going to wear for the day. They also liked to drive the same car, same color, same model. If it was a Lincoln Continental, they each had the same Lincoln Continental, usually burgundy. That was their favorite color. If it was a New Yorker from off of the line at the American Motors, it would usually be the same color, burgundy. They were very, very hard workers, very industrious, very humble people. Always had a smile on their face. My grandfather also was a very humble person. Even after all he went through, when I talked to him about his experience, he always said, "Darren, those were hard days, but they were good days." You know, they found they found to, even though things were hard, they still were able to enjoy themselves and have a good time.
And when did you come to Kenosha?
My parents met in Kenosha, were married at Second Baptist Church. They were not married. They were married in my mother's sister's home in Racine, but they were married by the pastor of Second Baptist Church of Kenosha, who was Reverend Mark C. Tolles at the time. Reverend Tolles was an educator. He was a principal at a elementary school in Milwaukee, and so he preached from his pulpit. Education was the key to make it out of Kenosha, or the key to succeed. Once you got an education, college degree, nobody could take that from you. And so after he stepped down as pastor, Reverend Olin Arrington replaced him, and he was also an educator. He was a principal at a middle school in Waukegan, and he preached the same thing from his pulpit, that education was a key. So a lot of black families were able to send their children to college, and so that was something that Rocky and Jimmy were very proud of, is that out of all of their children, all but two graduated from college. Same with my family. I was born in 1970 in Racine. My parents lived in Racine, and then so I've been in this area since 1970. So,
Did you go to school in Kenosha?
yes, I attended elementary at Bain Elementary, which was located at that time on 52nd, the corner of 52nd Street and 22nd Avenue, across the street from the Italian American Club. And then from there, I attended Bullen Middle School, which is called Bullen Junior High at the time, 7th grade through 9th. And then from there, I graduated and attended Mary D. Bradford from 1985 to 1988.
And what was your youth like in Kenosha?
I have fond memories of my youth. I don't remember any racist incidents growing up here in Kenosha. All the schools were integrated. It was very diverse. My neighborhood was primarily black. I grew up in on 4817 29th Avenue. So my dad was able to purchase a home there in 1974. I was able to go to local schools. I was able to walk to school, whether it was elementary school, Bain Elementary, or I was able to walk to Bullen Junior High, or able to walk to Mary D. Bradford. So schools were reasonably close. Had, like I said, a diverse group of friends, whites, blacks, Hispanics. We all got along for the most part.
Okay, and why do you think that there weren't any serious racial issues in Kenosha at that time?
At that time, I believe it was because there was such a small number of blacks in Kenosha compared with cities to the north, Racine, Wisconsin, and cities to the south, Zion and Waukegan. I think the key was having access to your city administrators, being able to sit down at the table and share with them the needs or issues that you had in order to be able to get them resolved. I think the key was the leadership at that time, which was Eugene Hammond, the mayor, willing to do that, do what was necessary so that we did not have racial disturbances like Milwaukee had, or Waukesha, or even Waukegan and Racine, because I understand Racine had a race riot in the 60s as well.
So how do you see that today?
So then and today, I always, in my humble opinion, even though racism was not overt, doesn't mean it was not latent. And what I mean by that, latent racism, I consider people will smile in your face and nod their head yes, but as soon as you turn your back, they They may say things about you or really don't mean what they say. It's latent. It's not blatant. It's not in your face. Down south, it was blatant. It was in your face. It was overt. If someone didn't like you, they told you they didn't like you, but at least with that, you knew where you stood. So I always looked at Kenosha as, being latent, not blatant. So I always considered Kenosha a pot simmering, waiting to boil over. It was there, under the surface. It just hadn't come to the surface yet.
Okay. And has it come to the surface?
Well, as recently as 2020 with the Jacob Blake shooting, you kind of saw it come to a head. You kind of saw it come to the surface during that time. And I think, again, out of something bad comes something good, that even though Blake was shot 7 times in the back, fortunately he did not die. He survived that incident. And that was something that we could learn from that incident, that, hey, we do have issues here in Kenosha. And I think, again, the leadership of Kenosha, Mayor John Antaramian, although he didn't move as quickly as some would have liked, he did finally, offer to come to the table and talk to members of the community about what can we do to change, and resolve these issues in our community as far as relations between the police department and the Black community.
So you think there is some hint of change?
I think people are willing to sit down and change, and right now I think it's, right now there's talk, but we still have to wait and see, what results come from the talks and discussions. I think it's too early, to tell right now. I think it's going well. I know that the police is doing great things in the community as far as community relations to mend the fence with the Black community. So we just hope that trend continues.
Okay. And your family, as you mentioned, many uncles or great uncles came here, other family members. How big is your family in Kenosha or around the country?
Well, my grandfather had 17 brothers and sisters. Most of them relocated during the Great Migration North to Chicago or Kenosha area. So about half his family is in Kenosha, half the family is in Chicago and abroad. So I would say based on 17 siblings and their children and their children's children, there's a lot of Maxes throughout the United States. We have a family reunion every year. We've done so faithfully. Jimmy and Rocky Grimes restarted it here in Kenosha when they relocated here around 1963, shortly after they opened a tavern. And we would have our family reunions in Alford Park, which is now Carthage College campus. And so the Max family is very close, very tight. It's a very God-fearing family. It's a very loving family. When we see each other, we embrace each other, we kiss each other. And so it's great to see that tradition continues. We are having a Mattox family reunion this year. Traditionally, it's always on Labor Day weekend. And this year, it's going to be out of all parks, Nash Park.
And when was the first reunion held?
The first reunion was started by my great-grandfather, 1928 in Elberton, Georgia. So it's almost 100 years. It hasn't been every year consecutively, but since 1963, it's been every year until COVID. And then COVID, 2017, this will be the first year that we have the family reunion since 2017. So I'm looking for a big turnout this year.
So looking back on your grandfather's story and that of Rocky and Jimmy Grimes, what sense do you have through all of that?
Well, I look from whence they came, the little small town in Elberton, Georgia of 6,500 people, the homestead in that town of Elberton, Georgia. Every year, my father and I go back to his hometown because he was born in Elberton, Georgia, and to see from whence they came. It's hard to access the family homestead in a minivan, so I can only imagine how it was to access it in a horse and wagon. And so in Georgia, there's a church in Georgia. The name I can't recall right now, but there's a Baptist church there. There's a lot of Mattox's gravestones where my great-grandparents are buried. I heard of a story of my grandfather and their brothers going down one year to redo the floor of the church. And so to see them come up out of that, and I asked myself, if they can do it, I have no excuse for not persevering and enduring myself, because they came from really nothing, and from nothing to owning not only their own businesses but their own homes and providing for their families in such a way that they could send their kids to college. My grandfather only had a 5th grade education, so if a man with a 5th grade education can purchase a home and then have another home built, there's really no excuse why the sky cannot be the limit for me. Infinite possibilities.
And of your father's children, have you graduated from college?
Yes, I graduated from Carthage College. Most of the Mattox family have graduated from Carthage College. We have a family member there now, Alexis Mattox, at Carthage College, and she's on the track team. She's a shot puttist and a discus thrower. I have had several other cousins graduate from there. So again, education has been the key.
Thank you.
Thank you.